When first starting off, Spellwork can definitely be one of the most intimidating things you come across. And there's a lot of questions about what's real and what works and how do you write your own and a whole bunch of stuff. Guys in advance for the long video, but I'm going to try to pack as much as I can into this right here. Hey, Jordan from Grimwire here. I just wanted to make a quick note that these are my theories and how I do things and understand things, which is kind of just an amalgamation from all sorts of spiritual practices, from the occult, traditional witchcraft, chaos magic, Buddhism, Thelema. Essentially what I'm about to say should be compatible with most viewpoints and not seem too crazy, but also realize that you may understand things in a different way, and that's totally okay too. Quick shout out, if anything helps, please give a subscribe, and if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I guess the reason I decided to make this video was that one of my kind of pet peeves is when I see people ask, like, do you know a spell for? What kind of spell? Or does the spell work? What do you think of the spell? And just those kind of general questions, as if kind of the construction of the spell is what matters. And just to be clear, it's not like I'm frustrated with people not knowing, but just that I wish it was clearer for what a spell is. Like, if you were in an artists group and there were a bunch of posts asking, does anybody know how to draw a horse? Does anybody know how to paint a house? Does anybody know? There are techniques you can use. There's drawing techniques, there's painting techniques, there's ways to draw animals. You can learn how to draw structures, there's perspective, there's color theory, there's all these things. If you're an artist relying on how to draw a horse instructionals, then you're just not going to get very far in your practice, and maybe that's what you need as a beginner. I'm just trying to put the information out there. And so to clear up a lot of those confusions and hopefully just clear up the process and make it not seem so magical, I guess, I decided to go ahead and make this video. So to start real simply, spellwork is one part of witchcraft. In general, spellwork is highly related to ritual, but I think there are some cases where one might not apply to the other. So ritual can definitely share a goal, similarly to spellwork, but usually ritual is more of a habit or something you just casually, regularly do to make a statement or to say something or to put yourself into a mind space, where spellwork, there's a goal, there's something you're asking for or trying to get, an end you're trying to accomplish. I'll go over a few theories in a little bit as to how it could actually work. I don't think it's important, actually, as the actual mechanics. All I know is that it tends to work if you look at your own experience, so it's up for you to decide. Essentially, a spell contains 3 different steps: defining the thing you want, building up the energy, and then setting the energy loose. Defining, building, setting loose. First theory, which is kind of the most relies on an external being, would be that every human has the subconscious ability to manifest their own reality. I won't get into how much I actually believe or whatever each individual theory, once again, because I said I don't really think it matters which one, and I don't think we'll really ever know. Yes, that your own subconscious is actually what does the magic. That when you access a certain mind space, a certain chemical balance, that actually sets forth the changes required to grab your own benefits from the spell. The second theory would be the deity does it, that when you do a spell, it's a prayer or a ask or a favor from a certain deity. And of course, the same person can use multiple theories and juggle them back and forth, like me, of course. So sometimes you might do a spell for a deity where you're asking a deity for something. Otherwise, you're harnessing the energy in yourself and putting that out into the universe. It's all about attention, and that's all it is telling yourself the story and making yourself believe it. Similarly to deity, but a lot less specific, would be the general higher power, the universe, nature, the higher self, a universal guide, the goddess, just a general goddess. Once again, it's the same thing. You're making an appeal to a higher being, In this case, the higher being might not want a particular outcome, such as when you're working with a deity, you want to work with that deity's qualities. When you're working with the universe, you kind of have access to all of those, but it's a lot less specific and a lot less personal. And then interestingly, the fourth one I'm going to throw in is actually the chaos effect. I'm throwing this one in because it's actually how I got started. It's what my ego, my kind of story I needed to tell myself when I first started off, and I just think it's really kind of interesting. So we know the butterfly effect, the idea, the concept that if you go back in time and change just one small little thing, then that could set off a bunch of drastic changes in the future. The chaos theory effect states that if you do that now, you can make drastic changes in the future. So the simple act of gathering ingredients, doing the ritual, makes the small little butterfly wing changes in your psyche and in your immediate environment that makes the ritual or the spell happen. Now, like I said, for like the 8th time, it doesn't matter how spells actually work. Now, I'd definitely recommend everybody taking some time to figure out on their own and to reconcile it with their own beliefs. But if you're trying to pin it down and that's what's holding you back, then I might have to make another video on what to do in that case. Okay, so now let's dive in step by step and talk about kind of each part I referenced before with the spell. So define, build, let go. Or defined, build, release. I'll get into that a little bit. There are different accounts. Some people say you should, keep it up and keep it in your memory and try to remember it as often as possible. People say once you do the ritual, forget it. If you hold on to it, if you're clinging to it, then it ruins it. Just let it go. You did your work. The job is done. Either way, the last step is always that kind of close the book, wrap it up, we're done with the ritual. First thing we'll talk about are creativity when it comes to intention. So I often see people trying to take a spell and match their, how can they fit that into their situation? Like, I need this done, but I don't know a spell for that, so I'll just try to do this and yeah. So creativity with intention is very important. I think people kind of get confused about intention. I think that's only because it's too easy. It's almost too easy to overthink it. So one of the ways I think this manifests most is with love spells. I see a lot of kind of make this person fall in love with me type of love spells. And I don't know, whatever, everybody to their own. I don't like things that mess with free will, that intentionally try to persuade somebody's mind directly. I think that's immoral, regardless of your personal beliefs about magic and theory. This is immoral to try to mess with somebody in that way. Somebody innocent in that way. Being, instead of directly trying to persuade someone else to love you, do a luck spell or love spell with the universe to bring the right person closer to your path. Put me on the path to meeting the right person is a lot better intention than make this person at work fall madly in love with me. One thing is doable, is a step you could take yourself. You're just asking for that little assistance. And then the other one, you're trying to bend and force reality to your will. And once again, not trying to judge anyone, but as a beginner, definitely, and even as the most experienced magician, whichever, you're going to want to learn how to swim with the tide and not fight against the tide. You're going to want to learn to not piss into the wind. And so that's the power behind intention and looking at your situation and figuring out what it is you actually want and how you can actually take those steps to get there. I think what always comes to mind for me is a scene from, if I remember correctly, one of the Aragon trilogy books. And it was a book when I was a kid. I think they made a movie a good few years ago now. But the master, the old wise master, threw up the young hero, the young apprentice, on a rock with magic and put the magic binding spell on him and said, now find your way out of this. And so the little hero guy used the magic spell and said, release these binds from my body. And the binds fall off and, he crumbles to the ground. And the master walks over and said, you're lucky I put very weak binds on you. What you should have said was release or weaken the hold of the binds on my body. Because if your energy would have exhausted all of itself into going in that, and then that leaves you with no energy. So that was just a story, but that's a metaphor that still sticks with me to this day, reading that as a young teen. Up until this point, we've all talked theory, we've all talked what we're going to do. We haven't actually done too much yet. This is going to be the first step. We have our intention. We know what we want to do by this point. We know how we're going to finagle either our energy or our deity or whatever it is through whatever. The next thing to do is to create something symbolic. This is where all the different sorts of magic come in. This is what jar magic, candle magic, sigil magic, offerings. Essentially, our idea is to then take this concept, this loose intention that we kind of have a grasp on, and then put it into something so that whenever we see that something, we're reminded of that intention. When we see a peace sign, imagine explaining a peace symbol to somebody who doesn't have the word peace. And there, we say, oh, it just means peace. Harmony, that concept of it is in the peace symbol. The peace symbol is something very small. It's a circle and 2 or 3 lines, depending on how you count them. And it means something bigger. So that's what we're doing. We're taking this loose intention, this loose idea, and whether we're putting it into a jar or we're symbolically, putting it into a candle, or we're creating a sigil, or we're putting them in the offering to then give to the deity, it's all the same thing. We're putting our intention in something physical. Part 1 is the heart and soul. Part 2 is the body. And then part 3, we're going to dress up the body. This is where things like crystals and herbs and other like maybe astrological symbols or planetary energies or elements may come into handy. So part 3 is we took our intention, we've condensed it down, and now we're going to focus on it with the intention in mind, and it's going to amplify. So when we're doing a creativity spell, we get lapis lazuli to help us with that. We get different herbs. We might activate the throat chakra or the third eye chakra. This is now kind of the heart and meat of what is the spell. Up until this point, you can you can create your sigil before you do the spell. You can buy your jar, or you can buy your candle. You can set up your jar before you actually enchant it and power it up. This might be the enchanting step, if you like that terminology. So we're taking that physical thing and we're forcing it with our intention, and everything we got goes in there. And that's the most important part that I think isn't communicated very well. When we're doing a spell, you have to really focus on that energy. If you want a job, if your spell is, I want to take the next steps to finding the job that's meant for me. I want to discover what I'm meant to do for money in life. Or I just need a few extra bucks right now. The energy you need to be focusing on is the pleasantness and how the job's gonna make you feel. You want to focus on finding the job, like doing it. When you're at a job you really like and everything's just moving in one motion and you're just kicking butt. that's the energy you need to focus on, not the need, not, oh my God, I'm going to be homeless. Oh my God, I'm not going to be able, oh my God, whatever. That's what you need to focus on. You can't focus on the energy of the need of, oh, I need this money for whatever it is. You need to focus on this is the positivity, the energy, the abundance. You need to manifest those feelings of positivity. And that would be in that case. On the opposite, if you're trying to curse or hex somebody, which I don't usually agree with, but I think there are cases, definitely defensively, where it may be one of the best options somebody has to them at any given moment. In the case like that, you can't think about the love for your children. You need to think about how much you hate that person. I think people get their intentions mixed up with their spells, and yeah, but also that is part of setting your intention. If your intention is to protect your children and curse this person, I mean, I would personally always go for protection. Instead of hurting somebody else, help yourself, but not trying to preach. Every scenario is different. Right, so we have our intention, we've put it in something physical, and now we've charged that physicality. We have our enchanted object, and now is the final step to finish it up. If you have a candle, you snuff it out or let it go out on its own. If you're doing sigil magic, this is where you burn it. If you're doing jar magic, this is where you bury it or set it on the shelf. If you're doing sex magic, this is where you do sex magic. This is the part of the spell that says so mote it be, or the Christians say amen, or I personally chant Om when I'm done with a spell. We have, to recap once again for the probably millionth time by now, we have our intention, put it in something physical, enchant it, and then we set the energy forth into the universe. And so that helps me dissect just about every sort of spell. You can dissect and understand any sort of spell using this framework, from simple, like I always love the example of singing Happy Birthday to be a little mini spell. So our intention is wishing somebody a happy birthday. We want to make sure they have a good year. The symbol, the thing we're actually empowering, is the cake. Think about how powerful the cake is. How, if you forget the cake, if you don't get a cake for your birthday, it's like, now, most of us probably wouldn't actually care, but I think you see what I'm saying. The third one is the singing and the lighting of the candles, and then we blow them out. So you can pretty much understand any sort of spell in this context, as long as you're building up the energy, you feel it, and you release it. I mean, one of the best spells ever is just a good, loud swear word. So with a little bit of this kind of explained and all out there on the table, I think you should now feel confident in, for example, being able to not only verify whether or not you vibe with a spell, but then hopefully feeling confident to change it. If you have a spell, a process, and you just change a few things, switch them out, I mean, it's gonna work. There's no rules, there's no ritual book. It's not like there were once upon a time witches who sat down and conducted, trial upon trial, and experience leads to some things, but everything in this realm is personal. What worked perfect for somebody won't work at all for somebody else. And that's just something you gotta understand and learn how to work with yourself with. This last section of the video, I thought I would go on for a few tips onto how to write your own spell. Some things to think about and some things to mention. Going back to intention, I think the most important thing, like I said before, is to work with the flow of the universe, to work with reality, to work with chance, and to work with free will. If you can work without breaking reality, only slightly modifying chances, and not trying to break anyone's free will, then your spells just aren't gonna fail. I mean, it's that simple. When you're not asking for big miracles, they're more likely to happen. I definitely don't think that should keep you from being ambitious. You should always be ambitious. You should always be willing to take chances and to take faith and see how far it can go. But when I just imagine somebody swinging at thin air, asking for miracles and getting frustrated to why it's not working. Tip number 2, related. And this is how to gauge kind of how important, how much energy to put into your spell. Spellwork, witchcraft is not a cheat, is not a quick route to anything. You should put as much effort and energy into your spell as it would take to actually do the thing. If you want a job spell, and just think about what that would actually require. Are you applying for a job you should get no matter what? Or are you trying to shine through 100 other applicants in something you're a little underqualified for? That really matters. If you're going for a longer shot, you're going to need to put more time, more effort, more things, do a candle in a jar, and now don't start piling things up unnecessarily, because then you're just confusing yourself. But as long as it flow and it feel and you work with it, then it gets pretty powerful. Tip number 3. This might seem a little contradictory to some of the things I've said earlier, but this is, every piece of advice has its time and place. I would recommend to work with something you're familiar with over the most specific thing for that. I would stretch, if you have a really strong personal relationship with the deity, I would stretch that relationship and say, hey, is there anything you can do with me about this verse? Before, maybe going to find the most accurate deity for that thing that you have no connection and no vibe with. Tip number 4. I've seen this discussed a lot, and I still, whenever I talk to people in person about it, and I show them firsthand how powerful this can be, they're always kind of shocked because they haven't just thought about this in its fullest expression. A spell is meant to invoke the energy within you. So one of the things you notice in a lot of Wiccan spells and a lot of kind of Fae spells is that they all have that rhymey, kind of sing-songy, fairy rhyme, that kind of energy. And you can feel it. Either you can or you can't. I definitely feel it when I read it, but I'm not comfortable expressing that kind of rhymey, sing-songy spell work and pattern in my own personal practice. I won't get too much into kind of how I phrase my own stuff too specifically. Some people have a really dark aesthetic. When people have a really ironic or sarcastic aesthetic. So I was teaching somebody about shields the other day, and so the one person I was with had a shield, and hers involves the line, turns anger into farts. Because that's one of the things. She's an empath. She's really sensitive to how other people are feeling. And so one of the things I encouraged her to do was to write something that was so immaturely silly, you would have to laugh at it. And, when you said it in a serious situation, the energy it takes to think those words puts you in the state of mind that she was looking to be in. And so the other person in the room was not that sort of person, very straightforward. And so I just gave them, okay, well, your shield is F you, F you, F you. Give it 3 good Fs. Not trying to get in any trouble here, so we're just going to say F, but you know what I mean. Whatever you got to do. I see posts all the time about saying yeet or bay or literally whatever brings out that feeling in you, what feels right and energetic, and your hairs stick up to say. When you get that feeling and you feel the shivers down your spine with the words you're speaking, that's when you know it's working. Number 5, don't be afraid to ask for stuff. A lot of the people who are getting into witchcraft, at least what I've noticed in this modern trend, are very giving people. They're trying to express what they have to give. And simultaneously they feel bad asking for things. They're and I think everybody probably has this on some extent, but I've noticed it some worse in some than others. The universe wants to help you do things. I understand that's kind of a magical concept on its own. It's kind of dogmatic. The universe, nature, whatever, like you're a part of this world. The world wants you to be whatever. You might feel bad asking for a deck of tarot cards, or feel bad asking for wisdom, or feel bad asking for patience. And like saying that out loud, hopefully it does sound silly, but that's how a lot of people feel. The universe wants to help that spread. So never feel bad asking for things. If you're giving it your hardest, if you sleep at night, like, and I'm not saying you got to be a great person either. Like, anybody fucks with you, fuck them up. If you're a good person, you're a good person. I'm not talking about this fake idea of, purity, but rather a real, like, I'm a real person. If you can, live with that, then you're off to a pretty good start. 6. So I already kind of touched on this a little bit, but to go a little bit into it further, the bigger the spell, or the bigger your ask, the bigger the spell. You can do multi-part spells. So for example, I've done things like do a spell charging a talisman. So like this talisman increases my magical power. So then I now use that talisman to power something else. And so you get like this chain effect. Or you can do a candle spell to power a sigil, to power something else, and chain them on like that. And you can end up with some pretty interesting and some pretty deep and some pretty gorgeous results doing things like that. So I did say I was going to say something else about it, and I don't think I did. At the end of your spell, after you're done, you buried it, you burned it, you said amen, or so mote it be, you've washed yourself, whatever y'all want to do. The 2 main pieces of advice, and of course I use them both kind of not interchangeably, but as the 2 extremes. I think kind of the biggest beginner mistake, and why I think the first piece of advice to completely forget your spell that you ever did it is because you get that kind of, oh my god, did it work? Maybe I should do it again. It's not quite done yet. Like, you get that sort of feeling of second guessing, like checking to see if it worked, asking people, stuff like that. So there's definitely a very powerful energy that you want to avoid when it comes to finishing up spells. At the same time, you don't just want to completely forget everything, and in order to make a lasting change, if you're going for any behaviors or going for anything of any power, you do want to remind yourself, kind of reinforce it, maybe meditate on the sigil. So something I'll do is I'll burn the original sigil and then remember in my mind. That's like what I'm doing while I'm meditating in that 3rd step. I'm staring at the sigil, I'm imprinting it in my mind so that even after it's burned, I'll be able to draw it later. It kind of gives a little bit of danger and a little bit of edge that, oh, what if I can't remember? Besides the point. So after you're done with the spell, either forget it or focus. Just don't obsess. Don't second guess. But that was really all I could think to say on Spellwork. What do you guys think? Did it help you? Are there any questions? Anything I missed? Just let me know down below. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you around.